What if America's first cities were built long before Columbus and their history deliberately erased? And what if billions of pounds of copper mined from Lake Superior simply vanished without a trace? Long before European contact, advanced civilizations thrived here, building monumental cities, massive fortifications, and mines on a scale rivaling modern industry. Their traces remain, though textbooks barely speak their names. These weren't crude frontier towns. Explorers described fortifications, castles, and stone buildings already standing. Structures colonists repurposed, not built. Old Quebec's ancient city and fortress walls, Kansas City's buried arches, Seattle's sunken houses, and even Cincinnati's grand music hall with its old-world detail. All point to a civilization advanced enough to raise monumental architecture, then erased and forgotten. Meanwhile, in Michigan, ancient miners pulled billions of pounds of copper from the earth. Yet only 1% has ever been found. Where did it go? And why do native traditions speak of sky beings who demanded it as tribute, with knowledge far beyond their time? I'm Rowan, and this is OTRA Legends. What you're about to see will change how you see America's past. A hidden story of ancient cities, missing copper, and powers not from this world. North America's ancient cities, evidence hidden in plain sight. Old Quebec rises like a monument to another age. Its walls, turrets, and Romanesque arches don't resemble frontier work, but the craft of master builders. In 1852, the New Yorker called it the most ancient city in North America, noting fortifications vast enough to shelter 100 ships. Even then, visitors sensed the walls stood on foundations far older than official history admits. Kansas City revealed a similar mystery. In the 1800s, workers uncovered stone arches and doorways leading not to basements, but to entire buildings buried 20 feet below ground. Windows looked out from walls, half submerged in mud, carved lintels hinting at a forgotten cityscape. Seattle's sunken houses told the same story. First floors already beneath the surface before the streets were raised, as if the land itself had swallowed them whole. The newspapers of the era were filled with such accounts. The Oshkosh Times wrote in 1886 of ruins of large cities, pyramids, and fortresses, of proportions that challenged the ancient world. And in 1858, the Raftsman's Journal described an old macadamized road, 11 miles long, covered with trees 150 years old. From Seattle to Cincinnati, excavations uncovered stone foundations, brick archways, and organized streets, evidence of cities older than the ones we know. Some were buried, others simply taken over by new settlers. Yet photographs of their original construction are missing. Cameras documented railroads and farmsteads, but not the raising of fortress walls or ancient streets. Floods and landslides are the official explanation. But when the same pattern appears from Quebec to Kansas, from Pennsylvania's roads to Seattle's sunken homes, coincidence feels less convincing. Castle walls rooted in bedrock, doors opening into nothing, newspapers already calling them ancient. Were these cities erased by nature or hidden by design? The scale of extraction. While America's cities were being built over these mysterious foundations, another enigma was being carved deep into the bedrock far to the north. Around the shores of Lake Superior, more than 5,000 ancient copper mines have been identified and cataloged by archaeologists. Some are shallow surface pits, others plunge hundreds of feet into solid rock, their walls still bearing the distinctive marks of stone hammers used thousands of years before Columbus ever set foot in the New World. But it's the scale of extraction that defies explanation. Conservative estimates suggest that over 10 billion pounds of pure copper were removed from these mines over the course of several millennia. 10 billion pounds. To put that in perspective, that's enough copper to supply the entire Bronze Age civilizations of Europe and the Mediterranean for centuries. Unlike iron ore or tin, the native copper found in the Great Lakes region could be worked almost immediately after extraction. No smelting required, no complex metallurgy, just pure, malleable metal that could be hammered into tools, weapons, ornaments, and trade goods. Archaeological evidence shows that some of this copper did indeed become arrowheads, spear points, and ceremonial objects found across North America. Native trade networks carried Great Lakes copper as far south as the Gulf of Mexico and as far west as the Rocky Mountains. But here's the problem. Even accounting for all the copper artifacts found across the continent, even including the most generous estimates of what might have been lost to time and corrosion, we can account for perhaps 1% of what was extracted. The other 99%, billions upon billions of pounds of pure copper, has simply vanished from the archaeological record. Where did it go? That question has haunted researchers for over a century. If it remained in North America, we would expect to find massive hoards, copper cities, or at least evidence of industrial-scale metalworking. Instead, what we have are empty pits, scars gouged into the bedrock, and a deafening silence in the historical record about where all that metal went. The testimony of the ancients, the absence of copper in the archaeological record has led to increasingly bold theories. Some researchers argue that it crossed the Atlantic thousands of years ago, feeding the Bronze Age boom in Europe and the Mediterranean. Others suggest it disappeared into trade networks we have yet to discover or understand. But Native American oral traditions hint at something far stranger and more unsettling. Among the Ojibwe, the Menominee, and the Dakota Sioux, stories survive of powerful beings who came from the sky specifically for the copper. These weren't casual traders or even conquerors, in the traditional sense. They were entities who demanded the metal be gathered and extracted on a massive scale. In these traditions, entire communities were organized around copper extraction, not for their own benefit, but as tribute to these sky beings. The stories describe a time when the mining wasn't optional, it was commanded. Families, clans, entire tribal confederations were directed to focus their efforts on pulling copper from the earth. The metal wasn't being gathered for tools or trade goods that would benefit the miners themselves. It was collected for export to somewhere else, by someone else. The Bible offers a striking parallel in the Book of Enoch, where the Watchers, beings from above, descend and reveal forbidden knowledge to humanity, including the secrets of mining and metalwork. These stories don't describe progress freely chosen. They describe labor performed under command, extraction demanded by powers beyond human comprehension. If we take these traditions seriously, the copper miners of ancient North America did not work for themselves. They were laborers, perhaps even slaves, supplying a demand not born of this world. The empty pits of Lake Superior may not be evidence of lost trade, but of an ancient extraction program, one that ended when the resources were exhausted, leaving only scars on the land and gaps in our history. The connection revealed. What if these two mysteries, the ancient cities and the missing copper, aren't just parallel anomalies, but chapters of the same lost saga? Imagine a civilization advanced enough to shape stone, build arches, and plan entire cities, yet bound by a force demanding tribute, on a scale that dwarfs anything in our textbooks. Let's connect the dots. The timeline of the Great Lakes copper extraction stretches back thousands of years, peaking long before the arrival of Europeans. Meanwhile, the buried stonework and sunken architecture across the Midwest point to organized urban development, urban centers that existed and were then abruptly concealed. Notice the geography. These ancient cities cluster along routes connecting the Great Lakes to major rivers, the natural highways for moving raw materials. If you were running a continent-wide extraction operation, you'd need outposts, storage, administration, and cities built for a purpose. But why copper? This isn't just about tools or trinkets. Copper is one of the best conductors of energy known to humanity. Ancient cultures worldwide seem to understand its properties in ways that still puzzle modern scientists. From Egyptian temples to South American alloys, copper appears at the heart of sacred and technological sites. So, what if the sky beings of native tradition, the ones who demanded copper, weren't interested in jewelry, but in something far more advanced? Energy, technology, or perhaps even interdimensional communication. The sheer volume of copper removed suggests a purpose beyond human need. Now, picture the aftermath. Once the copper veins were exhausted, the civilization that supported the extraction, its cities, its infrastructure, was no longer needed. Maybe it was abandoned. Maybe it was deliberately buried, erased, to hide both the deed and the knowledge. The stone arches and sunken windows we find today may be the hollow shells of a world that existed to serve a demand we can barely comprehend. The Great Erasure. If this civilization and its extraction program existed, then the way its story was wiped from history is almost as shocking as the evidence itself. The erasure wasn't just incidental, it was methodical. In the late 1800s, as American cities expanded and construction projects unearthed buried foundations, newspapers reported not only strange architecture, but also giant skeletons, mysterious artifacts, and advanced metallurgical relics. At museums, especially the Smithsonian, acquired thousands of these anomalies. And then, as if by design, they vanished from public view. Catalogs were rewritten. Collections disappeared into locked vaults or were quietly destroyed. This isn't a conspiracy for conspiracy's sake. The pattern repeats: initial discovery, brief excitement, then silence. Kansas City's photos of excavations beneath the bluffs are rarely shown in official histories. The scale of the Lake Superior copper mines is downplayed, their missing billions treated as a footnote. Even when the evidence is right in front of us, a bricked-up doorway, a pit in ancient bedrock, we're told it's a coincidence, a quirk of engineering, or just an old myth. But when suppression happens over decades, across different types of evidence and in multiple institutions, coincidence starts to look a lot like control. Someone, at some point, decided what would be remembered and what would be buried. The architecture, the copper, the legends of sky beings, all systematically stripped from the record. The silence surrounding these mysteries isn't just an accident. It's the final act in a story that began with mining, continued with city building, and ended with a deliberate attempt to erase the past. Across America, the evidence is right beneath our feet, streets built atop forgotten foundations, doors and windows buried deep below, mines emptied of billions of pounds of copper, and native stories of sky beings demanding tribute. Yet for all these monumental projects, the historical record is oddly silent. Almost no photographs exist of their construction, as if the past itself was meant to be hidden. These aren't isolated oddities. Together they form a pattern: advanced construction, massive extraction, and a systematic erasure from both the landscape and our archives. It hints at a chapter of American history far older and stranger than anything we're taught. Were these cities built by America's first forgotten builders? Was the copper truly a tribute to powers from above, or something even more mysterious? Or are we just glimpsing fragments of a story so complex it had to be buried, both in earth and in silence? The empty pits remain, the few surviving photos raise more questions than answers, and every anomaly uncovered chips away at the official story. Maybe the truth was never lost, just waiting for those willing to dig deeper, to question, and to see what lies beneath America's forbidden history. Have you seen evidence of buried structures or strange architectural mysteries in your own city? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. Thanks for watching. I'm Rowan, and this is OTRA Legends. Until next time, happy hunting.